Right, welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. We are delighted to be joined over the telephone by His Excellency Ambassador Hussien Haridy, the former assistant to the Foreign Minister. A very good afternoon to you, Mr. Ambassador.
Good afternoon, madam.
Thank you very much, sir, for joining us this afternoon, Mr. Ambassador. And, amid the latest situation in the Gaza Strip, Egypt is considered a cornerstone and a main pillar of peace and security, and has played a very active role in brokering the latest ceasefire in the area. How do you see the role of Egypt and the responsibility that Egypt takes on with regards to the situation in the Gaza Strip, sir?
Well, I guess Egyptian diplomacy worked with other countries in the region.
Yes.
In order to broker the ceasefire between Israel and the Al-Jihad al-Islami. And there was, the ceasefire was followed by a phone conversation between President al-Sisi and the Prime Minister of Israel.
Mm-hmm.
In which the President underlined the importance of respecting and honoring the ceasefire, and later on to work on the resumption of peace negotiations between the Palestinians and the Israelis. And on the other hand, the President underscored the importance of alleviating the siege, the Israeli siege of the Gaza Strip.
Mm-hmm. Indeed, Mr. Ambassador. And we've seen, with regards to feedback and the responses of the international community, we've seen American President Joe Biden welcoming the ceasefire. We've seen United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres also hailing Egypt's efforts in helping restore the calm, etc. What is the role of the international community with regards to this issue, Mr. Ambassador?
Well, honestly speaking, due to the war in Ukraine, the latest crisis in the Taiwan Strait, and the consequences of the war in Ukraine on energy prices and on food security worldwide, the Palestinian problem no longer, at least for the time being, enjoys a certain strategic priority for many countries. But of course, we have to, Egypt does not spare its efforts to remind everyone concerned that there should be a solution to the Palestinian problem. And of course, the longer we wait, the harder it will be for the Palestinians and for the people of the Middle East to live in peace and security. So I guess Egyptian diplomacy is working with international partners in order to facilitate the resumption of talks between the Israelis and the Palestinians.
Indeed, absolutely. Mr. Ambassador, also more than 300 Palestinians were wounded over the weekend when with the Israeli strikes against the jihad targets across Gaza. And we've seen the UN rights chief voicing alarm at the number of Palestinian children as well that were wounded this month alone because as a result of this fighting, and asking for people responsible to be brought to account. How do you see this as happening? Is this even a possibility, Mr. Ambassador?
Well, madam, the party that should be held accountable is the Israeli government.
Yes.
And as long as no one in the international community, not even the United Nations, is willing to pinpoint the responsibility of Israel in initiating attacks against innocent Palestinians, unarmed Palestinians, then Israel has no incentive to stop this kind of aggression. Having said that, the always Israeli aggression against the Palestinians is linked somehow with the domestic political situation inside Israel. This time around, it's linked to the fact that Israel, the Israelis will go to the polls on November 1st next. And the competition between the present Israeli Prime Minister, Mr. Lapid, and his adversaries, political adversaries, other candidates vying to gain majority in the Knesset, then makes it somehow attractive, if I may use this term in this context, to try to show that that everyone is eager to defend the, as the saying goes in Israel, to defend the Israeli public against what they call terrorism and terrorists, which is not the case, of course. So this aggression Israeli aggression in the last few days, in my opinion, was really linked to the competition, fierce competition between Mr. Lapid, Mr. Gantz, his defense minister, and Mr. Netanyahu, who is the leader of the opposition in the Knesset, and he has promised to regain power once again. So as long as the one thing that makes consensus in Israel is to attack Palestinians, then I'm afraid, madam, I'm afraid that the aggression, Israeli aggression against Al-Shahad al-Islami and against Gaza won't be the last, unfortunately.
Absolutely, and citizens are getting caught in the crossfire, Mr. Ambassador, and we've seen Egypt stressing the importance of establishing calm inside the Gaza Strip, you know, so as to help as well complete the ongoing reconstruction efforts in the Israeli blockaded Gaza, but to no avail, and this again is resulting in a dire humanitarian crisis on the ground in Gaza. The role of the United Nations Middle East Peace Process Coordinator, who also praised Egypt's role in the ceasefire, etc., and saying more must be done in order to deliver humanitarian assistance and address the Strip's people's needs. What are they doing in this regard, Mr. Ambassador?
What should be done, madam, is to lift the Israeli siege to our Gaza. We shouldn't accept this siege as something foreordained on 2.5 million innocent people, human beings, citizens of the world that are entitled, like any other people on earth, to live in peace and security and to live in freedom. So, yes, the representatives of the United Nations do speak about the dire humanitarian situation in Gaza, but they never pinpoint who is responsible for this. The only responsible party for this unprecedented siege against a group of people because of their nationality is Israel. And so I hope that the Arab countries would get together to pressure the United Nations in order to work for the lifting of the Israeli siege of the Gaza Strip. We Arabs, we Egyptians, cannot, on political, moral grounds, accept the continuation of the siege, or to live with it as nothing wrong is taking place. No, there is something wrong taking place in the Arab heartland, madam, and this is the Israeli siege of the Gaza Strip.
Indeed, Mr. Ambassador. And one final question, if I may, sir. How do you see, you called on the Arab world to take action and stand beside the Palestinians with, all within the framework of international law. What needs to be done in order to implement just the simple aspect of international law?
Well, Madam, the siege itself is a violation of international law, is a violation of international humanitarian law.
Yes.
And you may recall that in many instances, the West, led by the United States, in some cases, they always bring up the international humanitarian law. I wish, solely on moral grounds, they speak once that Israel is violating this very humanitarian international law that sometimes, from time to time, when it fits their interests, they bring it up.
Indeed. Right. Your Excellency, Ambassador Hussien Haridy, the former Assistant Foreign Minister, thank you very much, sir, for your time and for your insight. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, we wrap up today's episode of Arab Affairs. You were in the company of myself and Jumeher. Many thanks for joining us.